This is the Daily Tip on the BetQL network, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
Somebody's got to keep things going, and that includes people like you and us and everybody up and at 'em early on a Black Friday. Welcome in to the Daily Tip presented by BetMGM. Chris Mack alongside KJ Carson in for Chelsea Messenger and Michael Jenkins here with plenty of leftovers to warm up for you and make sure you get your fill of all the action. That I'm going to try to avoid all the cheesy Thanksgiving analogies and cliches, KJ. I'm going to try my best. They're still going to filter their way in. A belated happy Thanksgiving to you, my friend. How was it, and did you get enough?
Well, yes, I got enough, and please do not include any more cheese because then it would be the Daily Tip constipation version, right? Because absolutely, you start to realize, you're like, wait a minute, this is the real reason why they put gravy out, because if you put nothing green on your plate yesterday, it's like corn, mash, dry-ass turkey, and no gravy, then the Daily Tip is you probably need to get some water and don't have any cheese today. So, yeah, I know I turned your word cheesy into a real food thing, but I had enough. I had one plate, but we had like 70 people, and there was so much food. So it was a good time, and I did it all I just did one plate.
One plate, okay. I had way too many of the snacks that were out ahead of time, and then not a huge dinner plate. So it is what it is. But the key to the you mentioned the dry ass turkey meat.
Yeah,
you gotta have plenty of the dark meat. You gotta have a leg. You gotta have something in there, because otherwise the dry.
That's what the gravy's for.
Well, the gravy helps either way. But so yeah, the food was better than our bets. We'll get to plenty of football, like I said, both upcoming today, tomorrow, Sunday, throughout the weekend. But as far as football yesterday, I know we both had offers yesterday. I was 0 for 2 on my Thanksgiving bets. I had an Amon-Ra St. Brown anytime touchdown, and I had Giants and Cowboys under, which went over. We'll get into that game as well as the mess in Detroit. Bears fans, I'm sorry. That's all I got. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's something. I don't know if it's sabotagery. I don't know if it's just stupidity. I don't know. We'll get into it in a second. Yeah, I know you had a live bet on the Dolphins. Once
that
they
13
went
and
down
a half
early.
was looking great. At 13 and a half was looking great, and then once I hit enter, I looked up, I was like, damn, they just entered the red zone. There goes my 13 and a half at the half. And then at the end of the game, where I'm like, okay, if the Dolphins can run this back down the field and at least get the 7 points or score the 8 points, it will most likely cover my Packers win by 7-12. But if they fail on a 2-point conversion and only get the 6 points, guess what happens? The 13 hit.
Yep.
Sometimes you have to laugh from crying. But that type of laugh helped with me not having any vegetables on my plate last night, so I slept like a baby eventually.
Good. I feel like the Bears-Lions game deserves probably its own segment.
Its own book.
Seriously. I mean, the Bears season at this point deserves some sort of 30 for 30 docu type breakdown. So we'll save that.
Be like 36 for 30.
Yeah. Let's work in reverse chronological fashion.
Okay,
then.
yes.
Let's start with last night's game first. You mentioned the Dolphins and Packers. And 30-17 ends up being the final. You mentioned the 2-point conversion that kept it out of your win range that you had, the 7-12 margin of victory bet. The Packers just clicked early. I mean, Jaden Reed, another game after a few inconsistent weeks for him. Gets a couple of touchdowns early. Packers touchdowns on 2 of their first 3 drives, KJ. 3 of their first 5 drives. The Dolphins offense could never really get going. And then they forget that the run game exists once they get down. They end up throwing the ball way too much. There's just very little consistency from the Dolphins offense last night. They had been playing well as of late. It was a bit of a step up in weight class, though, against the Packers last night.
Yeah, it was also a step into the refrigerator for the Dolphins. I mean, what are they, 0-6 in temperatures under 40 degrees?
Yeah,
so
that trend
clearly
continues.
That means they're on the road. I think they mentioned last night they haven't played in any game under 55 degrees this year. So that's what's fascinating with Miami. I think this was kind of their last gasp in terms of getting a run at that last wild card spot. There's still parts of me that doesn't really buy Denver just completely yet, but Miami helped that cause last night. So I think Green Bay is going to be a fascinating bet going into the playoffs just because can you bet against the Green Bay team that potentially may see a Detroit team for a third time this season and get to play the game indoors? So I'm going to keep an eye on a Packers bet to win the NFC just in case, because the way they look last night and the run game that they have, they might be a sneaky bet to get you some plus money for them to win the NFC.
Yeah, they've won 7 out of their last 8. The only loss coming against those Lions that you mentioned. They'll travel to Detroit next weekend for a Sunday night game, I believe it is, a primetime game. Or maybe is it a Monday night game? I can't keep track of the days. And
it's the holiday week. I mean, tomorrow you're going to think it's Friday. Yeah, tomorrow you'll think it's Friday. Yeah.
Exactly. So, or no, it's a Thursday night game. Sorry. It'll be Thursday night in Detroit. So that's one to keep an eye on, certainly, if Green Bay really thinks they have a legitimate shot at chasing down Detroit. Even if they don't, you're talking about solidifying maybe a top wild card spot and then being able to make some noise in the playoffs and perhaps, like you said, get Detroit a third time. I just think, they've shown it against quality competition all year. It's kind of that's the difference between the two teams that we saw last night. Like I said, Miami had started to do some things. They were on a 3-game winning streak coming in, but it was against the Pats, the Rams. It was a step up in weight class, and that trend. Mike McDaniel said it after the game. That trend holds, and that narrative, even if it didn't have much to do with the outcome last night of the Dolphins not being able to win in the cold until they actually do it, that narrative is going to hold. So, you're absolutely right that until they actually do win one in colder temperatures, everybody's going to question whether they can actually do it or not. And I think they get one more game late. I think week 17, I think they're at the Browns on a Sunday night. We'll see if it remains on a Sunday night, that Dolphins-Browns game. But that'll be another opportunity. But by then, like you said, their playoff hopes may be gone.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what games start to move and flex here over the next few weeks because, there's some fascinating storylines in the NFC. You mentioned, if you told me if there were 2 big surprises, it would be how bad the AFC East has been because you thought there would just be one bad team and how good the NFC Central or NFC North is. Gosh, I'm telling my age, the NFC Central, right? The NFC North is because you've got 3 teams that all have 9 wins, so that's the fascinating part and how bad Chicago is. I'm thinking of all those people that laid all that money down at the beginning of the season. Bears can win the NFC North. I'm thinking, if you turn it upside down, maybe, so that's what's fascinating is because how playoff seeding is going to happen. It makes you wonder, who's going to be that really good team that still is going to have to go on the road. They may end up playing a team with a worse record on the road just because they're the wild card seed. Who's going to be at 5?
Yeah, maybe in a little over an hour we can do some NFL contenders and pretenders. Maybe we'll roll through some teams and tell you whether we like them as threats in the
You
playoffs
said dinner
or
roll.
not.
You said dinner roll. There's a food theme to go on. You said roll. I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm going to the kitchen, grab me a roll, at least nibble on something.
I don't have to eat for a week after yesterday. Welcome in to the Black Friday edition of the Daily Tip. Don't forget, all the best segments of the show always available in podcast form inside your free Odyssey app, AUDACY, or wherever you get your podcasts. Yes, we are going to go into a detailed breakdown because apparently Matt Eberflus isn't able to do it proactively of what happened at the end of the Lions-Bears game in about 10 minutes. The middle game of the 3 Thanksgiving Day games it was perfect. I saw someone mention this on social media yesterday, KJ. It was the perfect game to take a nap to after dinner. Cowboys, Giants actually ended up being more offense than I thought there would be. I took the under 39.5. Obviously, it goes over 27-20. Cowboys get their first home win in a year, I think it was. They cover the 4.5 as well. But it was a battle of Drew Lock, who actually didn't look bad at points, ran one in against Cooper Rush, who actually didn't look totally terrible either. This game this is what we've got. The dregs of it. You've always got one game on Thanksgiving that is just, I don't want to say unwatchable. For years, it was always the early game with the Lions, and this year it was the Cowboys and Giants, both just trying to stumble to the finish line, and you got what you got with a couple of backup quarterbacks.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that because for years we always used to say the Lions game was the game where you showed up at someone's house and you talked over the game until they said, come sit down and eat. Now you almost feel like, gosh, if the Cowboys keep looking as bad as they've looked over the last year and a half, this may become the game where people say, you know what, we're going to be kind of chic and eat around 4-ish. And that's when I'm like, don't ever have me at Thanksgiving again if we're just sitting down to eat and the Cowboys game has already started. But I mean, this may end up being the tryptophan series, at least for the next several years, you know? So yeah, my future son-in-law fell asleep on my couch watching that Cowboys game, where in the past, you know, it would have been like, hey, it's Cowboys against somebody, or the Cowboys or maybe the Cowboys will fire their coach after this game. There was always some kind of drama to it. I thought I was kind of watching for the train wreck to see just things kind of fall apart against the Giants and just see Jerry Jones literally fire him inside the sunlight of the unshaded curtain portion of his own stadium. That would have been worth watching on Thanksgiving, and then turn to a Hallmark movie, you know. So
yeah, it's the constant soap opera that is the Cowboys. DeMarvion over Sean, the pick 6 though. Yeah. And Rico Dowdle over 100 yards on the ground, including a touchdown. So the Cowboys get a 100-yard rusher out of the deal. I don't know if that helps Dallas fans feel any better today.
Hurt my daily fantasy yesterday. I had Dowdle as available as my last flex. I was like, Cowboys run the ball effectively today? It's not going to happen.
No, there was no reason to expect them to. No reason.
I was out of the money on that.
I would have been right there making the same decision with you. Malik Neighbors had a big day, 8 catches for 69 yards. So the Cowboys and the Giants will continue, like I said, to limp to the finish line this year. It's going to be interesting to me to see what Jerry does in the offseason, not just regarding McCarthy, because I think we can all see the writing on the wall there, but regarding the idea of actually paying anybody else besides the big 3, right? Like Dak, CeeDee, Micah. Okay, we're going to take care of those 3, but do we actually try to fill out a team around those 3 at all? And it'll be interesting too to see, you know, once you pay your quarterback that much, right, you know, you're putting a lot on him. And I like Dak Prescott as a quarterback. I do. I just don't think he's that dude who you can stack everything on his shoulders.
Well, I totally agree with that. I'm more concerned about is Jerry Jones at the point where he's going to listen to people around him, right? Because it feels like, and especially with our sister station down in Dallas, the stuff that he's had going on with Zach and those guys at the Fan down in Dallas, I'm almost wondering if Jerry Jones might try and hire Greg Popovich next year, just because he's just kind of losing some of the awareness of what's going around him. Under the guise of like, well, I know Popovich has won championships and he's here in Texas. Surely he can coach us at the championships here too. It's like someone needs to set Jerry aside, and probably Steven as well, and saying at some point you need outside voices to move forward in this league where, like you said, you're spaghetti tied with those contracts, especially once you start paying a quarterback. You've got to find pretty much a bunch of 8-year-olds to run around for the next 20 years because that's all you can afford.
We've all had that first touchdown bet called back before, but with BetMGM's Pro Football Second Chance, you get just that, a second chance on your first touchdown bets. Place any wager on a first TD score if it doesn't score first, but scores second instead. You get your entire stake back in cash. Check it out inside your BetMGM app today. Oh, Matt Eberflus. Oh, Caleb Williams. We break it all down next right here on the Daily Tip, presented by BetMGM.
Hey, this is Brad Evans. Join me on BetMGM tonight alongside Ryan Orvat, weekdays 7-11 Eastern, only on the BetQL network. And say hello to my little friend.
This is the Daily Tip on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
Oh, this is a disaster in the making here. You're going to have to do something when it comes down to this play. Incomplete, and the game is over.
Jim Nantz on the call on CBS yesterday as Matt Eberflus and Caleb Williams just kind of forgot that the clock was running out. Just an absolute disaster for the Bears. Again, how many games have they had end in disastrous ways this year? Welcome back in to the Daily Tip alongside KJ Carson. I'm Chris Mack, in for Chelsea and Jenks today. Don't forget, you can always watch the show on Twitch, twitch.tv/BetQL. Of course, you can always take us with you as well. The entire BetQL network live inside that free Odyssey app. AUDACY. In 20 minutes, we get into some college football this weekend. 4 big games today, all of them with varying degrees of relevance to the CFP. And then top of the hour, NFL Black Friday, Chiefs, Raiders, 3 o'clock Eastern this afternoon. We'll get into that in about an hour from now. We'll play NFL Contender and Pretender. Definitely a couple teams that played yesterday that would fit into either of those categories, as we've broken down both Dolphins, Packers, and Giants, Cowboys. But I just don't understand how this continues to be a thing where Matt Eberflus, and look, I can excuse the rookie quarterback thing to an extent because he's a rookie quarterback, but between Eberflus and Williams both just losing track of the clock at the end of the game, it's inexcusable. Here's Eberflus trying to explain it in some sort of mystifying way after the game.
So in retrospect, how should you have handled the final sequence?
Yeah, I like what we did there. Again, once it's under 7, you're gonna call timeout there, or actually under 12, and then really you don't have an option. Because it's 3rd to 4th, you got to throw it into the end zone then. So to me, it's I think we handled it the right way. I do believe that you just re-rack the play, get it in bounce, and call timeout, and that's why we held it, and didn't work out the way we wanted it to.
Yeah, you did, because you didn't handle it the right way, Flus.
Wow,
you didn't. KJ, this is look. I know you want to minimize the disruptions to the organization when you've got a young quarterback and you're trying to develop that quarterback. People talk so much about the first full offseason for a young quarterback, right? After his rookie year, going into his second year, that's where the greatest amount of growth is supposed to take place. You don't want to have too much disruption, but if I'm in charge of the Bears, I have to take a serious look at everything from the top down, including Matt Eberflus, and whether I want this guy in charge of my first overall pick quarterback, Caleb Williams, going forward. It's too many massive mistakes at the end of games.
You know what I saw yesterday reminded me of an unfortunate thing I saw in one of your standard chain restaurants in America, where if it gets to a point where an argument breaks out in one of these standard chain restaurants in America, and you start screaming at each other in the restaurant like, oh yeah, fine, well sure, just have me pay the bill again like I do all the time, it gets everybody's heads turning and saying, you know what, this is more sad than anything else. And that's what you just had on national television. You just had the Chicago Bears pretty much have the random argument inside of your standard national American chained restaurant, where it's kind of like 5 for fill in the blank price or what have you. One of those places, right? The menus are tattered. The tables aren't exactly washed off to the best. You probably smell the wash rag more than you do the ambiance of whatever they're trying to clean it up. It just stinks. That is literally a situation where Matt Eberflus is pretty much giving a finger to the organization. That excuse, I don't buy his crap, because here's another time when you call a timeout, when the clock is running and you're too far out of field goal range. You need to stop the clock. It is not even about like hey, we're going to run another play and then call the timeout. Because guess what? If you run another play, it's going to be 4th and 15? So you need to call the timeout and then get there, or spike the ball, do something. I can't think of a pro football franchise that is disintegrated live on television better than them, other than the Jets. But but this is one of the worst I've ever seen.
It's you have one job. If you have just one job, I should say, as a head coach in the NFL, it is to manage the game, especially when you've got a rookie quarterback who's got a lot going on, right? And again, I'm not trying to excuse Caleb Williams from this either. He should have had better awareness in that moment and understood, okay, I've got a timeout left. And even his comments after the game made you wonder if he was actually aware in the moment that he had a timeout left. And the clock is ticking. We've got to get this play off, and we've got to be able to call the timeout. It's Eberflus, when he sees Williams start to check out to the different play, I think has to run over, call the timeout, because at that point you've still got about 20 seconds left, and say, okay, I understand it's our last timeout, but Caleb looks lost out there, or Caleb looks like he's trying to do too much. It's my job as the head coach to bring the temperature down on this situation, to make sure we at least get an opportunity to kick a field goal to send this thing to overtime, call the timeout, bring the offense over to the sideline and say, listen, we just burnt the final timeout because we didn't like the look we had at the line of scrimmage. Let's find one play where we can pick up 8, 9, 10 yards on the boundary, get out of bounds, and then kick our field goal and go to overtime. If the look's not there, Caleb, chuck it away. We'll kick a long field goal. We'll take our chances. We're indoors. We'll make it. Don't worry about it. Although that's always a gamble as well with the Bears kicking.
I'm almost wondering if they don't really like each other. I'm not saying personally. I'm thinking, because we're in this day and age now where if the quarterback wants a new coach, you can find a way to get the new coach. And again, like they might have been giving him the play. Like, why do you have time to change the play with the clock running? And you probably have been giving the demand, do not call the timeout here. So like that couple in the restaurant, clearly everybody came across like it's over between those two. Like this is not like a one-off situation. It literally came down to them fighting over cheese sticks and some salsa and maybe a regular burger.
And I don't, again, I don't blame Caleb Williams for trying to get into a better play there. But then it falls back on him that if he's losing the awareness of the situation and where you are on the clock, the head coach has to step in. The head coach has to step in there and take over.
But he didn't.
Similar. So there's multiple failures here by Eberflus. One, he doesn't have the team prepared for that final sequence, obviously. I don't know if he himself is totally prepared for that final sequence. When his quarterback starts, when his quarterback starts to slip underwater, he doesn't throw him the life preserver. I understand he wants to save the timeout, burn the thing, and get the situation set so you do know that you're going to have a chance to get the kick away at the end. And then not just those failures, but the failure in the moment of not actually, again, resetting the situation, calming it down, getting your rookie quarterback to a spot where, hey, this is all we got now. We got one play. Don't take a sack. Get us out of bounds because we just had to burn the timeout while you were messing around changing the play. There's a lot going on there that a better coach doesn't have an issue controlling or handling. And I didn't want to bury Eberflus after the Hail Mary in Washington. There were a lot of people that were ready to do that, and I understood they were upset because similar to this situation, it's a big moment that you have to have your team prepared for. And he quite clearly didn't have his team prepared for it, right? As you had different members of the secondary running over to yell at the crowd at FedEx Field or whatever the heck they call it in Washington now. So he didn't have his team prepared in that moment. I was willing to let it go and say, well, that's on the players. But this is too many times now, KJ, Chris, where Matt Eberflus has not had his guys ready for the biggest play of the game.
It's as simple as this, Chris. The Bears need to sit down with their kids, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and say, Daddy is going to be moving to an apartment across town. We still love both of you. It's not because of you. It's not because of your talent, but Daddy is just not working out for the family now. That's literally what is going. Like what you're describing are the last days of a bad marriage. Like that. That's just literally what it is. I mean, I don't mean to make light of it, but hell, I mean that's literally what you saw. You saw a fight inside of like an Applebee's yesterday between a couple that just can't get it together anymore. And you know what Eberflus was probably saying with his body language and post game was, yeah, you thought the quarterback from California with the long flowing pink nails was all sexy at the beginning of the year. I tried to tell you this guy needs to learn some things, but he just won't learn. Just thinks his looks are going to get him across the finish line. Well, I'm here to tell you, well, those looks ain't going to last you forever, baby. And he's saying, well, yeah, well, I'm not going to call a timeout. I'm going to change the play at the line. I mean, this is the worst I've seen it because these are professionals. This was something that you would see at a high school game, not even at a high school game, maybe at a JV game, Pop Warner. And even in that case, what happens? The coach jumps onto the field and says, timeout, 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 timeout. Yeah. It didn't happen. That's letting them drown. That's what happened. He let them drown.
Yeah, and here's the thing. It is the second week in a row where the Bears come back in a big way, too, and it's all for naught. And now this thing is stretched to a 6-game losing streak.
That black dress works, doesn't it? Things are going bad. She bust out that black dress. You're like, damn, I remember why we got together. And that's them in the fourth quarter like, oh, my gosh, they could win this suddenly. And what happens? You realize that the marriage is irreparably damaged and something's going to show its ugly head, you know?
I just it's like I said, it's 2 games in a row now where they've come back in moments where you thought they were dead, right? They force overtime against the Vikings at home and still lose. And now this one, the Bears offense spent less time on the field, thanks to Double D working the board today on a Black Friday back at BetQL headquarters. But the Bears offense spent less time on the field in the first half than Shabuzi spent on the field during the halftime show, KJ. They were done, cooked in the first half. Caleb comes out in the second half, looks really good. Detroit steps off the gas. I get it. That helps the Bears get back into the game. But they get all the way back into the game. They got another chance to send a game to overtime, and the head coach screws it up again. I just don't see how Eberflus survives this.
Well, I survived not watching Shabuzi, and as a country music personality you probably appreciate. I don't think I could have watched the guy who people wonder why he didn't win an award for redoing Jaquan's Tipsy into a country song. like that went on for 7 minutes. Tipsy is like a 3-minute song, and it's supposed to be one of those duh songs. So a guy did that for 7.5 minutes. Oh, I'm glad I missed that. You know. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I was getting snacks.
I know
at
people
that point
love that song.
I didn't see the halftime
show.
That's
the most annoying thing.
But so the Bears are dead. 4-8 now. Eberflus probably dead in the water as well. You want to talk about head coaches who are just trying to play out.
Get a no-fault divorce. Get a no-fault. Get a no-fault. No-fault divorce because it's 2 marriages. Justin Fields, this guy's going to have more marriages than Elizabeth Taylor. That's an old-ass reference.
That is. And it doesn't get any easier for them down the stretch either, KJ. Like, they got to go to San Francisco next weekend. They take on the Vikings the Monday night after that on the road in Minnesota. They get the Lions again the week before Christmas. They play the day after Christmas, so a Thursday night game against Seattle. I know Seattle is up and down and inconsistent, but they've got to go to Green Bay as well in Week 18. I mean, I have a hard time seeing the Bears. I mean, look, a couple of those are division games, so maybe you steal one against the Vikings. I don't know. But I have a hard time seeing them get 2 more wins down the stretch. This is going to end up being a 5-12 team, most likely, even 6-11. And those, either one of those records is going to be a massive failure in the eyes of Bears fans. And I don't blame them. Like, again, it's a rookie quarterback. You knew there were going to be ups and downs with a rookie quarterback, but the head coach is doing nothing to help the situation.
At least you'll be able to show your legs again to Ben Johnson to show him, hey, Ben, I don't know if you noticed last time, but we showed you we are now available and on the market. And I have a little budget that we can go to probably a mid-sized American chain restaurant, maybe just a regional one. Maybe we could do a steakhouse, Ben Johnson, because you're the one we are having our eyes. We only have eyes for you. This is, is it any obvious? Is it any more obvious they laid down for Ben Johnson right there on national television? Have some dignity, Bears.
Whoever it is, they got a coupon for a bloomin' onion, and they're not afraid to use it.
Well, Ben's got a big one they're looking at.
College football, some massive games this weekend, especially as they relate to CFP chances. A pretty full slate today as well. We'll touch on all of it next here on the Daily Tip, presented by BetMGM.
Hey, it's Joe Ostrowski. Join me and Sammy P on BetQL Daily, weekday mornings at 9 Eastern, where we look to give you the insider edge and insights to help you make smarter bets.
This is the Daily Tip on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
Hey, you ready to hit Vegas? Watch the NBA Cup Finals live? Got your chance to do just that from November 21st, which was, about a week ago
Thursday.
now.
That was a Thursday,
So today's the 29th. Yeah. So through today, you've had a week to take advantage of this, today being the final day. BetMGM's giving you your shot to win a VIP trip to Vegas, including flights and 5 nights at MGM Grand. Tickets to the semifinals and championship games, a courtside photo op, and $2,500 in BetMGM rewards points. Just opt into the original bet sweepstakes. Next time you're in your BetMGM app, place a $10 original bet on the NBA Cup, and then you're entered, which you can do up to 25 times. Today, again, the last day to take advantage of that inside your BetMGM app. Top of the hour, we will get into today's NFL action. We got a Black Friday game in Kansas City at Arrowhead between the Chiefs, who are laying a big number against what might be the worst team in football. Their own coach called them that, I think, the other day. The Raiders. We'll talk NFL contenders and pretenders as well in about 35 minutes. College football this weekend. There are some games today. Oregon State, Boise, Oklahoma State, Colorado, the Egg Bowl, Georgia Tech, Georgia tonight. There are some other games on the slate, too, that are just massive for at least one, if not both teams in these matchups and their postseason chances, KJ. We'll get to Texas A&M in just a moment because I'm trying to think, is there a bigger game than that this weekend? I don't think so. Auburn, Alabama, the Iron Bowl, tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern. Bama ranked just outside the CFP picture now, and it feels like those hopes have been dashed over the last few weeks. But this game is always good. It's always historic. It's always Auburn and Alabama and something crazy happening. Bama laying 11.5, totals right around 52.5. I wouldn't be surprised to see Auburn upset Bama. I mean, money line is like plus 350 because it feels like Bama they're checked out, right? They're checked out on the season. The fan base is already checked out on Kalen DeBoer. We knew this was going to happen too, that they weren't going to grant this guy any kind of grace period or ramp up time. No, it's just you walk in, you better be Saban 2.0, boy, or else. And he hasn't been, right? Like he's a head coach in his first year at a new program, and they have not fulfilled their potential. So I would not be the least bit surprised if Bama kind of sleepwalks through this one and gets got by Auburn. I'm not betting it, but 11.5 is a big number, I think.
I think it's the right number just because there's performance and then there's pride, right? And so Alabama has not performed, but this Auburn game is pride, right? Like Auburn wins this game. This becomes kind of like a ha-ha joke moment, or if you remember back at the time when Auburn finally beats Alabama with Bo Jackson, Auburn becomes the conversation piece as things start to move forward. This is where the pride comes in. Like Alabama doesn't want to get into a situation where, one, they don't find themselves in the best opportunity to have multiple losses and be in the playoffs, the first year of the playoffs where you couldn't even get into the first 12. So that's a problem. That's the performance side. But if you lose to Auburn, it goes on top of the performance thing. If we were talking about an Alabama team that had one loss and loses to Auburn, it would be a big celebration for Auburn, but it wouldn't go against the performance that Alabama's had this year. So by having these 3 losses, Alabama having 4 losses is sometimes talking about the last 4 Alabama teams, right? And so I think Alabama shows up for this, but I think on top of that, they cover the 11.5 because if there's going to be some pride, it's going to be like stomping Auburn in this Iron Bowl game.
Maybe. Yeah, I think you lay out a good argument for that. I could see, again, there's something about this Alabama team. Yes, they've come up big in some moments throughout the year, but when you get boat raced the way they did against Oklahoma, your head's just not in it. And that's what I'm seeing from this team. I don't know if it's DeBoer. I don't know if it's the players. I don't know if it's a combination of everything, but they don't look like they're mentally prepared some weeks. And you do that in a rivalry game like this one, and it could end up biting you in the rear end. I know Ryan Williams is the freshman wide receiver everybody's been talking about this year. Keep an eye on a freshman wide receiver on the other side, Cam Coleman of Auburn, against this Alabama secondary. I wouldn't be surprised to see him have an explosive play or two, especially at a big moment that maybe swings this thing inside the 11 or all the way over to Auburn. Something to keep an eye on tomorrow night in the Iron Bowl. Notre Dame, KJ, I feel like the Northern Illinois game has helped keep the number down in a lot of spots for Notre Dame throughout the year now, because they're better. They're way better than just 7.5 against USC. I understand it's on the road, and you can, I don't know, maybe bake 3 points into that because we've seen travel mean a lot. I know Notre Dame's not a Big Ten team, but we've seen Big Ten conference travel in particular mean a lot this year with the 4 teams out west added to the conference. Right. So I get baking a few points into the spread for the travel, but Notre Dame is so. And again, I was not sold on the Irish coming in this year. I was not, and especially after the NIU loss, I was like, oh, here we go. They might lose to Army. They might lose to Navy. No, they have absolutely imposed their will defensively against the rest of their schedule, which I know hasn't been all that impressive. And
it's got icing on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. More importantly, Riley Leonard is actually starting to do some things with his arm here and there. I had kind of written him off even after the beginning of the season as well. Like, oh, that's great. Kid can run. Can kid throw? Kid has been making throws the last few games. I just think Notre Dame is a whole lot more than 7.5 points better than USC.
Man, when you tell me about Notre Dame this year, I feel like it's someone who's putting chitlins on my plate at Thanksgiving. To me, chitlins are the most disgusting thing that's ever been made. But people are like, well, it's an acquired taste. Well, like, it's an acquired taste to think that Notre Dame is really as good as they're ranked. And that's why I understand how their points aren't getting baked in there. Because when you lose to Northern Illinois in any past year, your story is over. But because it's Notre Dame, and this is why I think the college playoff is expanded, because there's this dying need to make sure that Notre Dame is somehow still in there. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go there. You realize that people see football now more than go to church in this country. There's this kind of a thing going on here in this country now. So I've never bought Notre Dame to be as good as the numbers that have been put on them. I thank you, odds makers, for kind of what we call keeping it real, right? Because the same Notre Dame team that got outclassed by Northern Illinois at home, yeah, they might only be 7.5 against USC on the road. Look, Army and Navy is great. Army Navy games, you can tell me they're undefeated leading up to. But who are they playing on the way there to? You know, Jumpsuit University, other things. They're in conferences that are not really very challenging. And then when they get against Notre Dame, we're supposed to feel like Roger Staubach is in the mix again. Like, no. Notre Dame has always had the soft schedule. The knock for me for them is commit. Even if you commit it to the ACC, at least we know that Clemson will be a watermark for you. Or maybe that Pittsburgh will be a real-time watermark to see how really good you are. Notre Dame is the big fool's goal in college football that you don't know how good they are until they put their last names on the back of the jersey in a bowl game.
Yeah. 9 times out of 10, even 99 out of 100, I totally agree with you on just about everything you said about Notre Dame. Because I think a lot of the same things about Notre Dame and, you know, join a conference, get a real schedule, all this kind of stuff. But then I also look at this year's, and I understand. It's been, you know, it's Purdue, it's Miami of Ohio, it's Stanford, it's Virginia.
It's NIU.
It's NIU. but I'll take their resume this year over some of the other teams we may see in the playoff. Like, look, I am a Penn State guy, but Penn State's schedule is no better or worse than Notre Dame's.
But who's their one loss to? Who is their one loss to? Who's Penn State's one loss to?
Penn State's. You're absolutely right. The loss is a massive difference, right? Like
NIU,
losing to Ohio State,
OSU,
yeah, exactly.
NIU.
But the argument for Notre Dame having wins on the road at A&M against a ranked Louisville team when they were ranked 15th in the country, wins against Army and Navy, who I know they're not as good as their records indicate either because of their schedule, and it's a very good point you made. You're right. We won't know how good Notre Dame is until they walk into a playoff game. And look, you look at the projected playoff matchups right now, it would still be hard to get an idea of how good Notre Dame is because as much as I love watching SMU play, and it's great that SMU has returned to greatness and all that, first year in the ACC, which is weird to say, if Notre Dame plays SMU in the first playoff game at home, are we necessarily going to find out that much more about Notre Dame in a win over SMU? I don't think we do. I think we're talking about them then going to the second round, and you still won't know if Notre Dame is necessarily as legit as their record indicates or not. So I understand what you're saying. I do think they have a couple decent wins, but you're right. The one loss is inexcusable.
Well, if Texas A&M loses this weekend, what happens? They fall out of the top 25. So their one quality win, because that's the other thing is, hey, if you beat Florida State in week 1 this week, that was a top 10 win, right? But look if you beat Florida State this week, who are you beating? Are you beating that same week 1 team? No. You're right about SMU, and that's the whole thing about the AC they're trying to figure out, but I'm just not in it. I'm just not in it. Notre Dame needs to play Penn State in an opening round, and then I'll be impressed.
Yeah, that would be a fantastic first-round matchup. I mentioned Texas A&M. We'll get into that a little bit later. NFL contenders and pretenders on the way in 25 minutes, and coming up next, a Black Friday game for the NFL. The Chiefs laying a big number against the Raiders. We break it down next here on the Daily Tip, presented by BetMGM.
Hey, this is Brad Evans. Join me on BetMGM tonight alongside Ryan Horvath, weekdays 7-11 Eastern only on the BetQL network. Bring the noise.
This is the Daily Tip on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
Alongside KJ Carson, I'm Chris Mack, live coast to coast on the BetQL Network. Wherever you may be in the world, right there inside your free Odyssey app. Download it today if you haven't yet. AUDACY. And, of course, on Twitch, twitch.tv/BetQL. It is the Daily Tip. We are in for Chelsea and Jenks today. They'll be back on Monday. Don't forget every afternoon as well. You got You Better You Bet with Nick and Femi giving you the latest odds and insights before the games get underway, all on BetQL and inside your Odyssey app. We were just talking CFP scenarios during the break. We'll get back into college football in about 35 minutes or so. Talk about maybe some of today's games as well as the big one tomorrow night at Kyle Field in College Station. A&M trying to blow things up a bit for Texas and sneak into the SEC championship game against Georgia. The Longhorns just trying to prove that they are as good as their record indicates and maybe better than their schedule would indicate. We know the Raiders are not better than their record indicates. The Raiders are just flat out bad. I think it's 7 losses in a row now. Or is it 8? No, 7. 7 losses in a row for the Raiders. Headed to Kansas City today, 3 Eastern on Prime. Raiders, Chiefs, Black Friday NFL game. Chiefs 10-1, rolling right along, even if some of the metrics and indicators maybe don't indicate that they're as good as their 10-1 says they are. I want to say it's the lowest point differential for a 10-1 team in at least a decade. I could be wrong about the time frame, but it's definitely one of the lower point differentials for a 10-1 team in NFL history. They're not the prettiest wins all the time, KJ, but the Chiefs are still the Chiefs, and they are winning games that they should win, and they are laying a massive number today at home to the Raiders, 13 points. I don't like laying big numbers in divisional games, but this is one that if I was dead set on betting Raiders-Chiefs today, I would consider laying the 13, even though it's a divisional rivalry, and the Chiefs have not won games running away at many points this year.
Yeah, this is another one of those featured shrivel for Shador games, because the Raiders are in that sweepstakes. I'm with you.
That's the first time I've heard that. Shrivel for Shador. Is that copyrighted? Yeah. Have you made up T-shirts yet?
It just came to my mind as you were. So in fairness, I kind of was listening to what you were saying, just trying to get the cadence, but it's a shrivel for Shador game. Look, the Raiders, I'm with you. 13.5 is a big number for a division game, especially a rivalry game. But if this game was being played in Vegas, I would probably hedge against this number. I think because with Black Friday, you've got the featured national game. I used to live in Kansas City. I kind of know how it is. They're going to want to kind of run it up because on Red Friday, that's what they call it, they get to play the game. So I think there's going to be a little bit of an energy of, and it probably helping for the shriveling for Shador. You might see a key pickoff or pick six in this game somewhere in there. So I might even look at playing a anytime defensive touchdown in this game by the Chiefs, just because the Raiders might just lay it down that badly. Here's what's crazy. Antonio Pierce is literally a walking guy who's telling you how bad the team is, and nobody's talking about how he's on a hot seat of being fired. Everything else is blowing up around him, but clearly he's doing the Lord's work for Davis there, because this must be what the plan is. Like, hey, just go through the season and let's have that conversation with Dion towards the end of the season about his son.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, if you're Antonio Pierce, you may feel some level of security in the fact that you got the response out of the team last year when you took over, and you did enough to retain the position. But they're absolutely everything's crumbling around you, right? Like Minshew's done now. You're on to back to Aiden O'Connell, and the Adams trade, everything that's gone on this year. It's been a disaster in Vegas. I don't know if like I get it, that's the way he coaches and he wants to call the team out and say, hey, we're not very good. But like some of that has to stick to Antonio Pierce too. And if I'm Mark Davis and I get through the season, with my team finishing, 3-14, 4-13, whatever it may be, I'm just glancing at the schedule. There could be a win against the Jags in there. They got a couple
They got to get down in that 2 area. They got to be closer to those 2-win teams to stay in it for
right.
sure.
Well, the Jags game might end up being, one of those two. That could be a battle for the first overall pick.
Right.
So I guess my point is, if you're a 3-14 team and you're the owner, what's keeping you attached to the head coach, especially if Dion may be out there and available, and then you've possibly got an inside line on drafting his kid? I mean, if there are a couple places, KJ, where the Sanders family would up and leave Colorado for, I got to think Vegas is near the top of the list. Vegas, maybe New York,
Kentucky.
But I mean,
they're not going. The Colonel Sanders family.
Nice work by you.
I throw Kentucky in there as well for some chicken.
But like they're not going to Jacksonville. Like Dion has no interest in.
Well, because he's from Florida, right? I think that's always in play. Florida always, that's kind of weird. He may go there where he knows he might have more of a span of thing. I don't think he goes to Vegas because with Brady now being part of the ownership group, I don't think Dion would want to be in that shadow. I think really if there's a shrinking for Shador location, I think Dion would want to get Shador to the Giants because you put him in New York City, Madison Avenue, the lights, the watches, the whole nine. You could do the dance in Brooklyn and now keep your watch. That wasn't a situation at one point. So I think if you're Antonio Pierce, I think ultimately you're doing the job that probably Davis wants, which is make sure you secure a high draft pick. We know we're going after a quarterback. I think they probably got burned with Michael Penix Jr. getting taken by Atlanta. I think that threw off their entire – I think that's what their whole plan was, to get the left-handed quarterback who could throw the bomb, and that's all part of that Raider mystique he would have fit. So I think they're like, well, you know what? That's something that we couldn't control and didn't see coming, and that's not a fault of the head coach. So we knew that we had no quarterback going into this year. You're still paying money on the Garoppolo situation, and you almost feel like Jimmy Garoppolo graduated from the NFL 5 years ago. So, if you're Antonio Pierce, you might be doing the work of the owner. It's like, we know how radio is. You start playing on Mario songs next to Britney Spears, someone is trashing the format, and they're the new PD. Maybe this is what the plan is to get people to say, you know what? We're stinking it up for a reason.
Shrinking for Shador. 56% of the bets on the spread at BetMGM are on the Chiefs laying the 13. 74% on the over 42.5. That's an interesting one because you've got a big fat spread, but you've got a relatively low total, which tells you the books expect this one to be what, like
21-7,
31-10 kind of game. That's the way I would read it. And comfortably cover, still come in under the number by a couple of points. I love the under in this one, just to sort of fade the public, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking the under because how many points are the Raiders really going to give you? 7,
right.
9, right? Maybe 9, and depending on how the wind's swirling in Kansas City, you could be looking at least one missed field goal from them. So that's one possession and drive that goes to waste. Yeah, why couldn't this game be 24-10 and you're still 8 points under that 42 and you cover the spread?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think, under, and again, what did I say the percentage was of the bets? Let me just double check. 74% of the bets at BetMGM are on the over. So if you're looking to fade the public and you want to play the total on this one, I absolutely love the under 42.5. That might be one I lock in for our best bets at the end of the show. Just because, like you said, the Vegas let's go back through the points that Vegas has put on the board during this 7-game losing streak. 19, 19, 24. That was against the Bengals, though. 20, last time out against the Chiefs. 15, 13, 18. So if you're looking for a mean there, it's coming in right around 18, 19. So I would feel pretty confident that the Raiders aren't scoring a ton of points. And the Chiefs' defense, let's be honest, it has won them a whole lot of football games. It is very good. Right. And so, under the 42.5, I think, is a really good play. And then, the Chiefs down the stretch have a chance to kind of lock things up early. You look at the rest of their schedule. They've got another home game against a divisional rival next Sunday night against the Chargers. That'll be a good one. That'll be the one that effectively allows the Chargers maybe to, believe that there's some kind of divisional race left, or puts it to bed early. And then, Browns, they got the Steelers on Christmas Day. It's in Pittsburgh. Texans in the mix late. And who thought, I don't think anybody would have thought, KJ, that when you got to week 18, that final game at Denver would end up meaning something, but it may end up meaning a lot. That could be a game for the Broncos trying to secure a playoff spot, and the Chiefs perhaps trying to secure the number 1 overall seed in the AFC.
Yeah, the AFC is really tight at that top. It's fascinating. Here we're talking about an everything in one team that seems to have 2 teams clearly right behind them. Some may even argue this is the year that they catch them, with the Ravens and with the Bills. So it feels like, hey, while the Chiefs may be the number 1 seed, there's this feeling like, but all the conversations have been over the years, you have to go through Kansas City. It's almost a done deal that you're not going to get to the Super Bowl. It feels different this year. So again, you mentioned that Denver game towards the end of the year. That can determine, especially now that Miami's out, I think that Denver is clearly in on their path in. I just don't know who else can catch them from behind there that's got 7, maybe 8 losses that's going to catch Denver with their 5 losses.
Yeah. The wild card picture in the AFC, it's tough to get.
It cleared up with Miami losing last night. Yeah, when Miami losing last night.
Yeah, I mean, could the Bengals somehow get back into the conversation? It feels like that ship has probably sailed as well. I'm just thinking, because you're probably getting the 2 teams from the West, and you're probably getting the 1 team from the North, right? Whoever doesn't win the division in the North, the other one, Ravens and Steelers, is going to be the wild card. You get your 1 team from the East. The Bills are running away with that. Probably the Texans from the South. I don't know. The Colts have been an interesting. I don't know what your feelings are on Anthony Richardson. I've said this since the day he was drafted, since before he was drafted. He is going to have moments where you look at him and go, "Oh man, did you see what Anthony Richardson did?" And then you're going to have moments where you go, "Oh man, did you see what Anthony Richardson did?" It happens from play to play, let alone series to series or game to game. So the Colts are an interesting study. They would have to rip off, 4 out of their last 5 or something like that. 4 out of their next 5 to remain in the conversation. So I don't think they're legitimately in it. I think you've got the 1 team from the North that doesn't win the division, and then the 2 teams out West are your 3 wild cards in the AFC picture.
Yeah, if you want to know what I think about Anthony Richardson, if he completed his next 9 passes, he still wouldn't be at 50% completion rate for the season.
That's rough. That's real rough.
9 or you can go 100% on your next 10 passes and you're still not 50% for the year.
We'll talk more contenders and pretenders in just a moment here on the Daily Tip presented by BetMGM. One number to keep an eye on. Isaiah Pacheco is supposed to be active today, is going to be back for the Chiefs. His number not listed at BetMGM right now. Kareem Hunt's rushing total is listed, 58.5 yards, juiced to the under. So at minus 130, that's an interesting number. I don't know if I would lean either way. I would probably lean under. I would think they want to get Pacheco involved enough that it does pull something away from the Kareem Hunt total.
I might play the over a bit just because if there's a big gain, right? I think Kareem Hunt might be someone that, if you're looking at touchdown props, yeah, you might even look at 2. But 2 or more touchdowns by him because of the short yardage. But with Pacheco, man, he might get 7 carries for the game, and that probably won't be enough to cut into 50. I'd probably say that you're looking at Kareem Hunt with probably about 60 yards rushing.
Right around the number, 58 and a half. Texas A&M, and some other massive college football games in about 25 minutes. Coming up next, we talk the AFC playoff picture. It sends us down a path of talking contenders and pretenders. Who's legit in both the AFC and NFC? Next, here on the Daily Tip, presented by BetMGM.
BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
Coming up in just a minute, NFL contenders and pretenders. In for Michael Jenkins and Chelsea Messenger, I'm Chris Mack alongside KJ Carson here on the Daily Tip, presented by BetMGM. College football before the end of the hour as well. In about 20 minutes, we talk maybe a couple of today's games, more than one of which. Let's see, you got Oklahoma State, Colorado, massive impact on the Big 12 championship game picture. You got Georgia Tech, Georgia. Georgia's already stamped their spot in the SEC title game, but they certainly can't afford another loss. Ole Miss, Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl later this afternoon. Feels like Ole Miss's playoff hopes have been dashed, though. I don't know if anybody in the SEC has a hope of getting in with 3 losses. We'll get into all of that, like I said, in about 20 minutes. A college football no-sweat parlay token available every weekend inside your BetMGM app. So if you don't hit your parlay, you get your stake back in bonus bets. Just place a wager with a minimum of 3 legs with odds of at least plus 400 to play. Then attach your token to that qualifying wager in your bet slip. Make sure you check out the full terms and conditions inside your BetMGM app, but a college football no-sweat parlay token there, whether it's today's action or tomorrow's or a little bit of both. We'll get into Sunday's action, the full NFL slate at the top of the hour, about 38 minutes from now here on the Daily Tip. But we were just talking about the playoff picture in the AFC, KJ, so let's talk contenders and pretenders. We laid out the AFC pretty well, I think, but Buffalo running away with the AFC East. The Dolphins have just about been put to bed after last night's loss in Green Bay. The Jets and Patriots not a part of the conversation. In the North, it's the Steelers and Ravens. One will win the division. One will be a wild card, probably the top wild card, depending on how things shake out over the final month of the regular season. Bengals, I guess if they run the table, there's a chance, but have the Bengals shown you anything that indicates their defense is capable of doing that? I don't think so. Big game against the Steelers on Sunday. Right. Browns are out of it. In the South, it's the Texans. I know, again, the Colts, they run the table. They could be in the conversation, but they haven't shown you anything really that indicates they're capable of that. Titans and Jags are out of the question. The West, we were talking about earlier, Chiefs in charge, Chargers and Broncos, probably the other 2 wild card teams in the AFC. Raiders are a dumpster fire. So which of these teams, we know the Chiefs and Bills are legit. If you got to pick another team in the AFC, especially looking at the market and how the numbers stack up, who do you like?
It'd have to be the Ravens. I think Ravens are really the only other fill in the blank. And I think it's funny because the NFL seems to feature games within the first 3 weeks that are previews to what's going to be one of the last 2 games for the entire season. I'm not getting into conspiracy theory land. There's no tin hat involved with this. But I think somehow it's going to come down to the Ravens and the Chiefs once again, but this time the Ravens figuring it out just because the Derrick Henry factor. I think in that cold weather, if you can just have that load coming through there, that's the difference between Ravens last year, Ravens this year.
The problem is the Ravens still have not shown the ability to remember that Derrick Henry exists in big moments. You look at their loss to the Steelers a couple weeks ago. They don't even have Derrick Henry on the field for the most consequential play of the game, a 2-point conversion attempt that would have completely changed the game. They don't even have him on the field in that moment. And I don't understand, are they overthinking it? Are they trying to get too cute? You brought this man in for one reason. It's to get over the hump in that situation that you're talking about, right? The playoffs against the Chiefs. And in a moment in the regular season where it's not like you have to test the theory, but sure, you could go ahead and test the theory. Do we want Derrick Henry on the field for the biggest moments week to week? You could answer it. Well, let's find out if we really think that's the way to go about things here. Let's put him on the field for a 2-point conversion against our division rival on the road where we have a chance to win this game, and you don't. So I agree. Derrick Henry is the difference, but the Ravens have to remember to actually use him as such.
What if this is one of the craziest stats I came across, and I don't think it was someone reported, it was just me doing my research. If you look at least the last 5 or 6 Super Bowl champions, despite what they did for passing yards during the season, the champion averages about 95 rushing yards a game once you get to the playoffs. So you could be this high-flying passing team doing all these different things, but you get to run you run the ball to win the championships. That still plays a big factor. So yeah, in week 10, if you don't do it, yeah, it's kind of like a mystery in week 10, but it will not be a mystery in weeks 19, 20, 21, 22. Derrick Henry is going to be the bell cow. You probably see even less running from Lamar Jackson just to keep that man of mystery thing. I think it's going to be the Derrick Henry show, even though I think he's number 1 or 2 in the league behind Saquon Barkley in rushing yards. You didn't get him to win the rushing title again. You got him to take him to Kansas City in the last game in your conference to say, you know what, Chris Jones, instead of having this free reign of constantly being out there, or one less play you're on the field to try and defensively rush, enjoy tackling Derrick Henry. I think that's the key factor, because I think what happens is the ownership goes to John Harbaugh and says, if you don't win it with what you have now, you're out. I think John Harbaugh is out if they do not win the championship this year, at least the AFC championship, especially if it gets to a point where it's them and the Chiefs, because John Harbaugh will lose you a game. That's the crazy thing. He will get in the way. He's got a little bit of Kyle Shanahan in him. Like, bro, you've got the obvious in front of you. Use it. And when you don't, what else can you do? I think that's what it comes down to. If they're in a situation against the Chiefs and he doesn't use Derrick Henry properly, let them stop him before you stop him yourself. Yeah, that's what I know.
There's a lot of Ravens fans that hope Todd Monken doesn't forget that Derrick Henry exists in the playoffs. Yes. So but at this point, it's wishful thinking, because you've seen him already forget that he exists in a massive moment in the regular season. We'll see how that plays out. I do agree that the Ravens are the next best team in the AFC. They're at plus 325 to win the AFC at BetMGM. Chiefs 2-1, Bills plus 275. You go down the list. Steelers are 12-1, Texans are 14-1, Chargers 15, Broncos 25. The Texans are an interesting question. Contenders or pretenders, KJ, the Houston Texans? What do you think?
Pretenders, like Chrissy Hines singing for them. They're pretenders. And here's what's happened. CJ Stroud has been hit with we figured out the second-year quarterback thing. So where we gave him all the praise and said this is the future of the league, I always say this league is based upon once they get tape on you. It may be 7 games for some guys like Mac Jones. It could be 20 games for a guy who I think we're at CJ Stroud, who's about 25 games into his career. And once you know what he wants to do over that span of 25 games, defenses can make their adjustments. Remember, it's 11 guys doing that one thing to confuse this one guy. And if he's still in his second year, the next move is, can CJ Stroud make the adjustments? I don't think that happens this year. I think the growing pains of it are this year, which is possibly like they could be cruising for an upset in the opening round in the playoffs, right? Because they may be the ones that face the Steelers or the Ravens, depending on how the division goes in that 4 or 5 game. And you would almost say both of those teams could take it to Houston on the road. So I think that's where Houston will find out the hard way that, hey, maybe it isn't. There's still some things to kind of figure out.
Yeah, there aren't any teams on the NFC side who have that number in the teens like the Texans do, 14-1 to win the conference. On the NFC side, Lions obviously are the clear favorite, plus 135. Eagles plus 325. We know both of them are legit. Saquon Barkley, who you mentioned earlier, is leading the league in rushing. He's out here gunning for 2,000 yards, hurdling people backwards, doing all the things. Packers are next on the list at plus 650, and we just watched them beat the Dolphins last night. Contenders or pretenders, KJ Carson, the Green Bay Packers?
They're contenders, and if you're thinking the way that I'm thinking, you might jump on them now at 6-1 because that number is going to start coming down. I think especially once you see what happened with the Vikings, I think they'll start to come down as well, which will kind of push Green Bay up into the conversation. And let's just say the way things shake out right now, if Green Bay had to play Philadelphia, you would figure like that could be a very fascinating situation where they potentially could beat Philadelphia, just because if you think of the early in the season Philadelphia team, that could reappear. Nick Sirianni can always provide a gift at the end of the season that Philadelphia doesn't want to see. So if they get to a point where, hey, the Packers are playing the Lions, that's where I get into the argument of, can you beat a really good division rival potentially a third time in a season? I don't know if they can. So Green Bay's obviously a contender, but I would also look at, if you're thinking about sprinkling something on, do it now while you still got some decent plus money before it stops dropping down to like into the 4s.
Yeah, I'm going to cop out on this one and say I'm not sure yet. The jury's still out because they do play Detroit next week, right?
So you're taking the or. You're taking or in contender or pretend. Yeah. You're taking the or? Oh, my gosh.
Because I do think – I tend to agree with you that if you're going to jump on the Packers, now's the time. Because if they go to Detroit and win next Thursday, that number is going to come way down. You're right. I guess you could look at it the other way and say, well, if they go into Detroit and lose, is it going to come that far off of 650 plus 650? Is it going to come that, depending on what Minnesota does, and a massive game in Minnesota, December 29th, week 17, between these Packers that we're talking about and the Vikings, that could end up deciding who the top wild card is. Because when you look at the NFC standings, one of those two teams is going to be the top wild card. I don't think they're catching Detroit for the division. Again, something crazy could happen Thursday night in Detroit with the Packers and Lions that maybe changes that. But right now, it's going to be the Vikings or the Packers as the top wild card. And actually, the top two wild cards, you look at the divisional winners that they're going to go on the road and face in the first round of the NFC playoffs, and it's not that scary, right? Like out west, it's who wants to win the division. You want to win it? You want to win it? No, I don't want to win it. You want to win it? Nope. Niners are banged up. Maybe they make a charge late, but right now it's the Seahawks and the Cardinals both sitting there at 6-5. The Seahawks would win the tiebreak. And you've got Atlanta in the South, right? The South, same thing. Messy division. Nothing. I mean, Tampa's a game behind. Maybe they put things together in the final month. So if you're Minnesota or Green Bay, you're going on the road probably as a favorite in the first round of the playoffs. I mean,
This may sound crazy when you mention this. If you're the second winner, if you come in third in the NFC North, you probably have the better path to the NFC Championship than if you're the higher seed, right? Because if you're the 5 seed and you beat that 4 team, probably Seattle on the road, you're playing Detroit the next week, right? But if you're that 6 seed, you're playing that 3 game first, so you're playing Atlanta first, and then, well, no, you would get Detroit. I forgot they give you the lowest number. That's what I love about the NFL, that you can't, like, it's not like the NBA where you can hide behind your standing. So, yeah, go get the 5 seed and hope that the 6 wins with you as well.
Yeah, if 5 and 6 both win, then the final spot in that NFC North amongst the playoff teams, you're right, would be headed to Detroit for a third matchup between those two teams. Which, let's be honest, I mean, Detroit's going to be favored in that game, as well they should be, but divisional games, divisional matchups, those rivalry games in the playoffs, honestly, anybody can win. So I think that, you get, if you had the Packers going to Detroit, which again, we'll see on Thursday night, in the second round of the playoffs in the NFC, I mean, is that more than... Man, what's the spread on that one, I wonder?
If it was a third game in the playoffs with Green Bay going to Detroit, And presuming that Green Bay has lost both of those games against Detroit this year, I think that spread is probably at 6.5.
Yeah, I think a lot of it would depend on how Thursday's game plays out too, right? Like, we'll see how it goes. And again, Packers upset the Lions in Detroit. That's going to completely throw this thing upside down. But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. NFL contenders and pretenders. We talk Sunday slate specifically at the top of the hour. Coming up next, a massive final weekend of the regular season in college football. We talk about a few of the games today, as well as a big one. Texas A&M playing tomorrow night for a berth in the SEC title game. It's all coming up on the Daily Tip, presented by BetMGM.
Hey, it's Sammy P. Join me and Joe Ostrowski on BetQL Daily, weekday mornings at 9 Eastern, where we look to give you the insider edge and insights to help you make smarter bets.
This is the Daily Tip on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
Back into week 13 of the NFL season at the top of the hour after, I don't know if it was an underwhelming Thanksgiving Day slate. Definitely if you're a Bears fan, it was disappointing. But we'll see if the rest of the NFL Week 13 slate can stand up to our expectations. We previewed Raiders-Chiefs a little bit earlier. If you miss anything, don't forget you can download the Daily Tip, always in podcast form, inside your free Odyssey app, AUDACY. And that's where you can take the BetQL network with you wherever you're going as well, including every single night. Ryan Horvat, Brad Evans, BetMGM tonight, not only reacting to all the action in real time, but also offering you their instant advice on some live in-game wagering as well, all on the BetQL network and inside that free Odyssey app, AUDACY. Alongside KJ Carson, I'm Chris Mack, in for Chelsea and Jenks today here on the Daily Tip. Our best bets before we wrap up as well. College football this weekend, though, KJ. Massive games being played not just today, but tomorrow as well. We'll get to Texas A&M in just a moment. Oklahoma State, Colorado is an interesting one to me. Massive spread on this game because Oklahoma State has been a huge disappointment this year. I'll own it. I had Oklahoma State as a Big 12 champ coming into the year. I thought they'd be right there with Utah.
You bought into the QR code hype?
Yes. Look, they didn't lose much on the defensive side of the ball. And I thought that defense would look in the Big 12. Everybody can score points, right? Everybody can score points. And I thought having one of the better defenses in the conference, which I expected Oklahoma State to have, would help them battle it out atop the conference with Utah. Utah's problem has been another injury-riddled year for Cam Rising. We know that. For Oklahoma State, it's just been a disaster, absolute disaster. But this is a bigger game for Colorado, obviously, because if they win, they still have a chance to get into the Big 12 title game. And the Big 12 title game conversation is about as clear as mud. There are 4 teams with an opportunity to get in, including Arizona State, who plays Arizona on the road tomorrow. But this is a massive game. You made a very good point earlier, I thought, when you mentioned the networks are dying to have Colorado in the playoff. And really the only way for that to happen is to win the Big 12 title game. And to win the Big 12 title game, kind of important you're actually in it.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they're probably saying, can we get some of those University of Miami officials here for these last couple of Colorado games? Because, look, the network needs Colorado like a camel needs water in the desert. And here's why. They ultimately want to put Colorado up against one of these big teams. They don't care if Colorado wins or loses. They just want to be able to have that narrative. So if you could have a Colorado versus a Notre Dame, that's one of those numbers. It's going to be like that buffering thing that you saw for the Jake Paul fight is going to kind of happen for that college football because so many eyes will be on that game. When Colorado lost to Kansas last week, it kind of put a little too much water in the Kool-Aid because if they had won that game, then there could have been even reasons for them to be an at-large team if they still only had 2 losses in terms of being a 2-loss team in terms of the entire bigger picture. When you get to Oklahoma State, they get kind of strange at the end of the year, if you've ever noticed this. Like, they can have a bad season, but have a great win towards the end of the year that puts a wrench in everything for who they just beat. I think they did it to Kansas a couple years ago when Kansas went on their little run, ran into Oklahoma State, and suddenly it was just like a... So this is one of those trap games where everybody's having the conversation about where Shedeur may be heading. What is Deion's next move? Travis Hunter as the clear Heisman favorite. Oklahoma State might say, hey, we can just dig into those deep pockets that we've always got here and suddenly remember that we're a better team than what we've shown our record to be. while there's a big number here, I'm kind of on that little upset watch in this Colorado game.
They've been inconsistent late in the year, right? Like there's the loss to Kansas, obviously.
Right.
And, shaky against Cincinnati, the loss to Kansas State. I think there's a good question about whether they really belong in the CFP, but if you win the Big 12, won't matter. You'll end up there. Not as a top four. It seems like Boise's got that on lock as the fourth of the five conference champions. But, I still think
12? I think that's where they're looking. It's like if they could find a way for Colorado to be the 12, especially now with Alabama potentially facing its fourth loss, like if you can't have Alabama in it, the next best thing I think for them they would probably feel like is how do we get Colorado into that 12-5 game?
And I think seeing that it's right there in front of them, Colorado, I think they put it on Oklahoma State today. It is interesting that it's a 12 Eastern start, noon Eastern start. So it's going to be another morning, 10 a.m. kickoff out in Colorado. They've had that once or twice this year because everybody wants them on their televisions, which we just got done talking about. Total on this one, big too, 65.5. I think I'd lean under because I don't know if Oklahoma State's going to be able to generate the offense necessary against Colorado. I think this one ends up being a blowout. I'm not running to the window to lay 16 points, but if I had to bet this game, I would bet Colorado and lay the 16. Tomorrow night, biggest game of the college football.
Going to snatch you by the collar. Slow down, son. This is a casino.
Tomorrow night, the biggest game of the college football weekend is in College Station, Texas. Kyle Field. This is a renewal of a bloodlust rivalry. Two programs that absolutely, fan bases that hate each other. A&M has always felt like little brother to Texas, and now they've got an opportunity to rip away an SEC title game berth from the Longhorns. 5.5 is the spread. Total sits at 49.5. This is Texas's opportunity to prove to everyone that they are as good as their record says they are. This is not the environment. This is not the environment for less than 100% Quinn Ewers to go into. This is one. I do think they'll have an Arch. They've always got Arch Manning packages ready to go. I think Sark does, but I think there's the possibility exists. Whether it's due to injury and or performance, you get a lot more Arch Manning in this game than you've had in the last few weeks, I think.
Well, this would be an interesting test for for Sarkisian because if I'm talking to his team right now, I say, look, this is the best environment to prepare us for the SEC Georgia home game, right? So if let's use this environment that some of us are familiar with, but is considered the most intense environment in all of college football, to win this game, to try and be dominant in this game, to prepare us for going to Atlanta in a couple of weeks to play Georgia. So it's a twofold. It's like you can't get to one without handling the other. So they've got to handle Texas A&M at Texas A&M because that environment is going to prepare them for, now look, Texas is going to travel well, but tell me it's not easier for someone to make that hour-and-a-half drive from Athens down to downtown Atlanta to pretty much see a disguised home game. So they got to perform well in this game. I don't mind seeing some type of, like you mentioned, you might have to go to Arch Manning at some point in this game. That's okay. You want to get through this environment, and if people need to have the conversation, who's going to be the starting quarterback in the SEC championship? Is it going to be Ewers? Is it going to be Arch? That's fine. It makes Georgia prepare even more. So do it. You have to treat this almost like as your SEC championship game, just so that way you're really well prepared for the SEC championship game.
I mean, this may be bigger than the SEC championship game. I understand there's a bye at stake in the playoff in the SEC championship game because whoever wins that is going to be one of the top four conference champs. But if you You can't lose this. Otherwise, there is no SEC championship game. And Texas has been shaky. I know they had the Michigan game early in the year. But other than that, they've only played 2 other true road games. One was at Vandy that they only won by a field goal. The other one at Arkansas where they only put 20 points on the board. They won 20-10. This is an A&M defense that is a really good Aggie defense. And Mike Elko knows the right buttons to push. I don't know if I necessarily like A&M for the upset, but I wouldn't be shocked if it happened. I think this is going to be a one-possession game. I think this thing's going to come down to the wire. And if you're telling me you're giving me A&M 5.5 points at home, I'm all over that. In fact, I probably would actually start shopping around looking for that 6 somewhere to see if I could get that.
Well, yeah, there's your one possession, right? Anything once you start getting over 6.5, now that's when you get some, maybe you find some plus money, but I don't think you probably get probably closer. You're probably really not getting that much of a value getting up to 6.5 if it's baked in at 5.5 now. So, I'm with you. Like, this probably comes down to a field goal. If Texas can get their running game going with Blue and with the other guy who's out with some injury as well, they haven't been as dominant as they should be this year with the run game. If that starts to perk now, then just like we were talking about with the NFL, these games are now really playoff season. Playoff season starts for Texas tonight. I think for Texas A&M, if they lose this game, depending on how they lose this game, and again, I'm with you, I think they do lose the game. Yeah, they'll drop out of the top 25, but what will their quality of bowl game be? So I think that's the conversation for Texas A&M. They've got to show well in this game to be able to place well when they get to their bowl seeding.
Yeah, I mean, it's the season on the line for the Aggies. And wild environment. First time they've played in 13 years. And not just the chance to do or die for yourself, but to do it against the burnt orange. Oh, yeah, it's going to be wild tomorrow night at Kyle Field. The Sunday slate for the NFL. We talked yesterday's Thanksgiving Day games and today's Black Friday game. Let's look at some stuff that we like for Sunday afternoon. Next, right here on the Daily Tip, presented by BetMGM.
Hey, this is Brad Evans. Join me on BetMGM tonight alongside Ryan Orvat, weekdays 7-11 Eastern, only on the BetQL Network. And say hello to my little friend.
This is the Daily Tip on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
Double D dropping some beats to get us moving here on a Friday morning. I need to move. I need to move after everything I ate yesterday. I got to at least get up.
Well on your Friday hill, shopping to the beat.
Alongside KJ Carson, who's busting out early 80s freestyles a la Sugar Hill Gang. I'm Chris Mack. We are in for Chelsea and Jenks today, the final hour of the Daily Tip. If you missed anything, you know it's always available inside your free Odyssey app. Download it today if you haven't yet. AUDACY. Get everything in podcast form wherever you get your podcasts by following and subscribing to the Daily Tip. We've broken down college football games, some massive ones. Just got done talking Texas A&M, talked Iron Bowl earlier, as well as Notre Dame's place in the playoff with just 7.5 points being given to USC on the road in a big one tomorrow. We talked Black Friday, Kansas City, Las Vegas later this afternoon, and we talked about the Thanksgiving Day games and even gave you a few contenders and pretenders in the NFL. So let's talk Week 13 Sunday in the NFL, KJ, and maybe just roll through the slate. I don't know if there are any games that you like in particular that you're absolutely dead set on betting on. I know one game that is massive, not just because it's a divisional game, but because one team is trying to stay atop the division and the other team is fighting for oxygen in the playoff conversation in the AFC, and that's Bengals Steelers Sunday afternoon in Cincinnati. Steelers struggled against the Browns. They did not look very good at all. The snow didn't help, but I don't think that had anything to do with it. It's this offense that continues to get bogged down from time to time in the red zone. And the Steelers are getting 3 on the road at Cincy. A Bengals offense that continues to look, well, I mean, it's Burrow and Chase, right? Like, what else do you need to say? The offense is doing its job. It's the other side of the ball. And so this is, I want to say, weakness on weakness. The Steelers offense has had their moments, but this is an opportunity maybe to open things up even more and prove that they belong atop the division and that they aren't a fluke, as some people still think they are.
Well, it's interesting that the Steelers are at +3. To me, that tells me that the odds makers believe that the Steelers and their love of field goals is really a problem, right? This is the team that's like, we can get you 12. You're like, 4 field goals? Possibly. Look, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins is back as well. You feel like the Bengals are at the point where they feel like they've got to outscore you. Can we out 31 you? Right? So we'll push ourselves to try and get 31 to see if you can get 34. Because our defense will give you 27, right? So I know there was a lot of math just there that just came out of my math, but the whole idea is not to add but to subtract. And the subtraction has really been, hey, when the Steelers kind of freeze up, right, do you feel like they can get themselves over a hump on a team where you know that's going to try and move the ball up and down the field? Now, I will say it's not going to be as easy for the Bengals to move the ball up and down against that Steeler defense. It's going to be more of a challenge than probably anybody else they've seen. But still, them putting up 21 points, I think, is a bit of a challenge for the Steelers. But I do like the Steelers to win the game, so I would play that on the money line and take them at +135 to win the game outright. That's how I would play it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Burrow has been able to be effective despite constantly having a pass rush in his face. That's something he's just – it's second nature to him now, given the fact that they haven't been able to keep a consistent offensive line in front of Joe Burrow his entire time in Cincinnati. The Steelers, they force turnovers and force mistakes out of quarterbacks because of that pass rush. It'll be interesting to see if they can do that to Burrow, a quarterback who traditionally still makes plays despite having the pass rush in his face. For what it's worth, the Steelers secondary, I think, is a little bit better than a lot of people have been giving them credit for. Joey Porter Jr. and Dante Jackson on the corners are going to have their hands full, though, against Chase and Higgins. Another 1 o'clock Eastern kick. This one, 2 teams battling for playoff positioning. one in the NFC, one in the AFC. The Chargers laying a point on the road, KJ, at the Falcons. Money line on this one, it's Chargers minus 120, Falcons even money. So that's probably the play if you're going to play this game at all. I'm surprised, to be honest, that the Chargers that this is basically a pick 'em, right? I would have been I would have thought it would be Chargers laying a field goal, maybe. I understand they've had their issues this year, but I think, look, I look at the matchup between these two offenses in particular. The Falcons have been wildly inconsistent, and the Chargers, I think, know what they want to do, and they've been able to do it more often than not. It's not a question of whether the Chargers are better than the Falcons or not. They are. It's a question of whether the Chargers are amongst those contenders in the AFC, as we talked about earlier. I mean, I would go out all the way out to 3 on this one and feel comfortable laying the points with the Chargers.
I'm staying away from this game because this feels like I'm taking 2 9-volt batteries and fitting them into each other, right? The Chargers do more than what they have, and then the Falcons do less than what they have. And literally you feel like that's the -1 +1 meeting each other. It's the game I stay away from because Atlanta could explode, right? And that's one thing that could happen. And at the same time, you feel like the Chargers may be out of gas because they've really exerted themselves over the last few weeks with very little. I would keep an eye on the nicked up situation with J.K. Dobbins. He left the game, their last game when they just played. You know, if he doesn't have that running game behind him, I don't know if I would be confident in Justin Herbert trying to put it all on his arm all over again. Palmer and Johnson haven't really lived up to par, helping out with, Lab McConkey. Lab McConkey, I think, is kind of a bit of an overachiever in that situation. The use of Disley is very heavy. So when you see a lot of heavy tight end usage and a lot of slot usage, you're really depending that the running game is there and that you feel like you have to get things done quick. But then Atlanta's defense hasn't been up to snuff this year. Matthew Judon has been really a bust for them. So that's why I'm staying away from this game. It's almost like you can have 5 things right and 5 things wrong for both sides. And then, where's the value? If there's any value I would see, maybe I would go up on the plus money on the Falcons, thinking that if they win, it isn't going to be a 1 point, 1 point win. I would probably move up to +3, maybe even +4, believing that Atlanta does win the game and they might win it by a touchdown just because they might just go off. And then you get some more plus money that way.
Cardinals-Vikings is a surprisingly interesting matchup. The Cardinals coming off a rough loss to Seattle. They need to bounce back to stay with Seattle atop the NFC West, hold off the Niners, and maybe have a hope, especially if it's a win over the Vikings, of getting in as a wild card if they don't win the division. The Vikings, we got done a little earlier talking about the Vikings and the Packers as the second and third teams in the NFC North. Packers won last night at home against the Dolphins. The Vikings defense is impressive, KJ. It's why I don't count them out of any game, despite the fact that Sam Darnold has turned the ball over more than any other quarterback not named Gardner Minshew this year. 14 turnovers by Darnold. At the same time, that offense has shown an ability, big play-wise, to come up with one every time they need one. This is a really interesting game to me, not just because of the playoff positioning implications, but it's 3.5. Cardinals getting a field goal and the hook on the road at Minnesota, where the Cardinals have not won since 1977. Take that for what it's worth. I don't think I'm betting this one unless I've thought about the under with the total sitting at 45.
Yeah, this is a tough game to touch, but you're spot on about Brian Flores and his defense. If I would look at anything, I would go back and look to see, I don't know if Arizona, how did Minnesota play? What was the spread when they played against Chicago, and did they cover? I think because Chicago and Arizona kind of mirror each other in terms of what they do offensively. Like in terms of who they have as their receivers, who they have as their run game, who they have as their quarterback. So if you know that you're probably running that same game plan that you ran against Chicago against Kyler Murray in Arizona. So I would probably look at – go ahead.
I was going to say, to answer your question, I think that ended up being a push, the Vikings overtime win over the Bears, because I think it was a 3-point spread.
Probably why you're subconsciously telling yourself you're staying away from it. And if
Yeah.
it's 3.5 and it looks like it was 3.5 there, it's a push. Then you might be looking at a push all over again because you're going up probably even with a little better quarterback play from Kyler Murray than you're getting from Caleb Williams.
So I'm taking Arizona in the 3.5 if I'm hell-bent on betting this game, I guess.
Right.
I'm not.
You've got to do it. You're right. Well, you don't got to do it. But if it's something that you're like, hey, I'm looking to do, then yeah, look at what you got from the Vikings Chicago game, because there's some similar DNA in terms of how those teams are made up and how they play the ball and how they play the game.
Can we just agree that nobody needs to watch Colts Patriots, and that's a game that's if a tree falls in the forest kind of game and nobody's there to see it, does it still happen? Like,
now wait
2.5.
Are you saying this because you know
to Foxborough?
Are you saying this because you know I work for WEEI and therefore
No.
I have to watch this game? I've watched every Patriots game this year. Will it be painful? It's probably why I drink vegetable juice when I watch these Patriots games. But yes, if you're not in the New England area, you know, like, I feel for you if you're one of those people that when you turn on your television and they give you this as the early game and as your only optional game because your home team is playing in the 4:00 window. God bless you. But I will be watching this game. What do I have to offer to tell you in this? That's it from a bettor's edge is there is a very big concern about the Patriots defense ability to stop the run. They're very porous through the middle. The other night on our show, we said, look, if the Patriots give up about 4.7 yards per run, and if you look at the history of Jonathan Taylor, that could look like a running game of anywhere from about 117 yards to about 150. So if that's the case, look for Jonathan Taylor to run for 100 yards. But if Anthony Richardson decides he wants to pick up and throw the ball, then it's a whole different ball game. So if the Colts lean on the run, the Colts easily cover the 2.5.
So I was curious when you mentioned, like, what poor suckers get this game on their television that aren't in the local markets. It's really nobody. I just checked the map. It's basically only on the air in like
Indianapolis and
Indiana
and
New England.
New England.
Yeah. So
well,
congratulations.
If a tree falls in America, nobody hears it.
Exactly. Seahawks Jets, also a 1:00 game. I don't know why this is basically a pick 'em also. Like, the Seahawks are coming off of what I thought was a nice win against Arizona. I understand the travel involved, going all the way across the country and everything, but the Jets are a dumpster fire, man. And the Seahawks are only laying a point. Money line, similar to that game we talked about earlier between L.A. and Atlanta, is -120 on Seattle. Even money on the Jets. What are we doing? Who's betting the Jets in this game, KJ?
The shrink for Shador crowd. This is another shrink for Shador game. Look, I'd always thought that Aaron Rodgers, win, lose, or draw, was going to chicken out and not come back next year. He's now hinted at that. The Jets are sitting in a position where they could potentially get into kind of a bidding war, if you will, in terms of trade or moving up in the draft, that if they go get Shador Sanders, that may be even a more attractive situation for Shador going to the pros while still going to New York with all those weapons that are there. So, I think Seattle wins this game, and I think the Jets are thinking about, like, how do we get ourselves closer in the shrinking for Shador Sanders sweepstakes? Triple S, you know?
Yeah, I just...
Did I copyright that in person? I created that last hour here on the BetQL Network, courtesy of Odyssey. All rights reserved.
There you go. Yeah, it's a verbal copyright. Start making the T-shirts. Texans, Jaguars, also the final game on the 1:00 portion of the slate. Texans only laying 4. It's on the road. It's in Jacksonville. But 4 doesn't feel like enough. I thought this would be more of like a 6.5, KJ.
Well, I wonder, like, let me pull up the weather here real quick in Jacksonville. Because when I see something like that, I think, are they expecting rain? Is it going to be a sloppy game? And the answer is no. It'll be 64 and sunny. So when you've got that going, I think it's, look, when Mac Jones is in there, Like I would try and push that Texans spread somewhere up to about 9, honestly.
Ooh.
And see if I can get myself some positive money on that side of the ledger, because Jacksonville just has absolutely no path to offense with Mac Jones under center. None.
Yeah, I don't ever like to deal in anything more than a touchdown in a divisional game, even with a team as bad as Jacksonville, especially given some of the flaws we've seen in the Texans the last few weeks. But I would definitely go, like I said, up around 6 on this one and still feel comfortable. The 4 just
scared
doesn't
money
feel.
don't make none. Go to 9. Get yourself paid.
Go to 9. We'll continue to roll through the Week 13 NFL slate next. Alongside KJ Carson, I'm Chris Mack, in for Chelsea and Jenks here on the Daily Tip, presented by BetMGM.
Hey, this is Brad Evans. Join me on BetMGM tonight alongside Ryan Orr.
This is BetMGM Tonight on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM. The sportsbook born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
In for Chelsea and Jenks, it's the Daily Tip presented by BetMGM. Chris Mack and KJ Carson with you for another 40 minutes or so. Our best bets before we wrap up. And we were just rolling through week 13 of the NFL slate. We've talked about last night's games and whether Matt Eberflus will still be employed by Monday or not. Maybe he'll make it through the year, I guess. We talked Chiefs, Raiders as well. The Black Friday game this afternoon on Amazon Prime. And we got through the 1 o'clock games. What about the afternoon slate? We'll get to that in just a second here. KJ, what's your favorite, what's the one thing at Thanksgiving dinner that you end up eating way too much of?
Wow. You know, I'm proud of myself because yesterday I did one plate. So based on what was the thing that I had more of on my plate than anything else, there was some really good fried chicken that was on there. So it was, like I said, we had everything: turkey, fried chicken, there was ham, there was barbecue slaw. It was so much stuff. Shout out to the Middlebrooks family, man. They decided to do the extended thing. So, yeah. I mean, there was so much food that when I saw one guy coming out with 6 styrofoam plates. And I was like, clearly that has to be the end of, man, they still had other bins of food they were still opening. So I was like, you know what?
Wow.
Even though I was kind of belly aching, was like, how guys going to go off and see the game? They held it in a lounge. There were TVs on both ends. Nice. So you could at least see what was going on. So it was like, you know what? We may have to do this like this every year just because, like, you ever been in, this is how much food there was. Like, by the time you got halfway into the line, you still hadn't even reached the macaroni and cheese. So now you're like, okay, gosh, yes, that's how amazing. Like that baked chicken, baked turkey, regular turkey, slawed turkey. It was like, we need to do this every year. But the good thing was I didn't have multiple plates.
Good. See, I only had the one plate as well. I had way too many snacks before, like, early afternoon. Okay. But then when I did get the one plate, I always load up on the stuffing. I can't resist stuffing.
Really?
There is one. Yeah, because think about it. At what other time of year is stuffing routinely served? Stuffing, dressing, whatever you want, however you get it done and get it made. Never. It's really only late November through early January. That's it. You got like a 6-week window where you can get stuffing. That's it. It's not like you're going to a cookout in July and they've got the tray of stuffing there, right? Like, it just doesn't happen. So I load up on it when I can. I have to play.
So are you a stovetop stuffing guy, or are you a made in the cavity of the bird type stuffing guy?
It can go either way. I mean, it depends. Yeah. You got to do a little bit more than just the stovetop stuff out of the box, though, right? Like, you got to hit it with a little extra something.
Well, the thing was over stovetop and out of the boxes, you never have to worry about how bad the bird's diet was. So that's the other thing. Like, sometimes you might have to fry that bird at 500 degrees so that way that stuffing is palatable. Because if not, I mean, talk about hooves to mouth disease, So that's why I stay away from the bird stuffing that's cooked inside the bird. Because some people think like, oh, you just cook it along as the bird's cooking. It's like, no, the bird has to be cooked, and then you put the stuffing in there. Some people think you do it all together. I'm thinking like, okay, I don't want salmonella.
Well, then you got to cook the turkey for so long and at such a high temperature that it gets even more dry than it already is. And we already talked about that earlier. Nobody wants a dry-ass turkey.
You inject the turkey. Look, early in the marriage, I did the turkey myself one year, and boy, I had the needles out like I was Dr. Feelgood. I mean, had the Old Bay mixed in with a little bit of the Tony Chair, put it in some oil and put it in water and put it in syringes. Man, those breasts were popping out there. They were popping out like it was Sidney Sweeney, So, like, I had that turkey going, man.
I did not have Sidney Sweeney and
on your
turkey breast on the bingo card for today's edition of the Daily Tip. But
there's a lot of turkeys on social media, so there you go, right? Chris over here turning red on the show.
Let's talk about the leftovers. which are the 4 o'clock games we didn't get to yet. 4:05 in New Orleans. This is one. It's not quite on par with the Colts-Patriots. If a game gets played in a forest and nobody watches it, does it still count? Level, but 5-6 Rams, 4-7 Saints. Rams laying 2.5 in New Orleans, total at 49. The Saints, I didn't expect the Saints to be much more than a 9-8 team this year. But they feel a whole lot worse than their 4-7 record indicates, KJ.
Well, that's because, they've got Chris Olave, who was put out with the concussion. Dallas Allen's been fired. The usage rate of Alvin Kamara has got to be up there with Giannis Antetokounmpo in the NBA, right? The overuse of him, Derek Carr's ability to just throw receivers dead almost. So look, it's a dumpster fire, but here's what's crazy. I don't think the odds makers are wrong with the plus 2.5. You feel like between one Ram getting hurt, like you only need just one Ram get nicked up and out of the game. And now this really becomes a push game. And, the New Orleans fan base are still going to be passionate about winning this game because the Rams are an old rival from when the Saints used to be in the NFC West. So there's still kind of that hey, there's going to be something there. But yeah, I like to kind of bet on games where I see some type of action, and I don't know where the action is in this game.
Yeah, I like the Rams defense. They have, at least up front, weathered the retirement of Aaron Donald as well as could be expected. You don't lose a generational talent like that and not skip a beat. But Jared Verse has been very good, the rookie edge rusher who they got in the draft this year. I think the hole in New Orleans defense, as maybe they're getting a little healthier, is still on the back end. And Kupp and Nakua are healthy. I think Stafford carves up that secondary. I have no problem laying 2.5 with the Rams on the road in this one. Again, won't be a wildly entertaining game to watch, I don't think. But I like the Rams laying the 2.5. Also, another NFC South matchup in Charlotte, the Panthers hosting the Bucks and getting 6 at home. This division every year, even in years where you expect it's going to be better, this division just isn't it. I love watching Baker Mayfield play football. I do. Right. He's a gamer. He's diving into the end zone, doing the Tommy DeVito celebration in New York. I could watch him play football
more like the Daniel
all day.
Bryan. You got to do it a little slower, but it looked more like Daniel Bryan's yes than it did the Tommy DeVito.
Yeah. Yeah. But the problem is you never know when Baker is going to do something he shouldn't do. So look, the Panthers are bad. I don't expect Carolina to win this game, but I could see it being uncomfortably close for the Bucks on the road in the division. I'm not laying 6.
Yeah, I'm with you because think about it. Probably the best receiver on the field in this entire game is Adam Thielen, right? That's crazy to think about it when you're talking about what's going on in this Panthers-Bucks game. And because of that, I can see this being a one-possession game towards the end, or the Panthers kicking the field goal, dropping the score down to 4, and end up losing the game with the Bucks running out the clock, and there's your 6. So there's your cover on the 6. So I could see the 6 being covered. I'm with you. Panthers win the game. I don't even think that's in the discussion. Panthers covering the 6, I think that's a real possibility, especially what they did against the Chiefs last week.
Yeah, Mike Evans is healthy again, so that he might be the best receiver on the field in this game.
Okay, I didn't know he was
put him
back
ahead of
playing yet.
Yeah, so I think that's – but I do think the run game is actually probably more of a chance to have an impact here for Tampa's offense. Panthers defense allowing a league-worst 160 rushing yards per game. If you're looking at Bucky Irving or Rachaad White props at BetMGM, Irving's at 56.5 rush yards. White is at 40.5 rush yards. You might be okay to take the over on both of them, KJ.
Yeah, because the duo that they've run back there, it's an impressive duo, right? I think looking futuristically for the Bucks and the way the NFL's going, if you've got two quality backs going, that's a lot to build around. So I'd even look at an Orton anytime touchdown. I know that the Panthers have been pretty poor in their defenses against the tight ends this year. Tight ends have been able to kind of eat against those guys. So maybe an anytime auto touchdown. I'm sorry, I said Orton. Auto touchdown. It might be in play as well.
I completely skipped over one of the 1 o'clock games. I just realized Titans Commanders. Commanders laying 5.5 to a bad Tennessee team at home. 74% of the bets on the spread at BetMGM on Washington to cover the 5.5. I think if this got to 6, I'd probably tap the brakes and think about it. But as long as it sits at 5.5, and actually it's out to 6 now in some spots. I should take that back. 5.5 in spots, 6 in others. Shot for the best price, because if you can get less than 6, I think I'd be comfortable laying it with Washington against Tennessee. 6, I start to tap the brakes.
Yeah, this is one of those where it's because I feel like the Commanders are losing a little bit of their momentum that they've had early on. You just feel that energy, and this is one of those games where you feel like they should win by more than what is listed. So I would definitely probably either look at taking the under on the total, or probably taking the Titans to cover the 6.
Yeah. One last late afternoon window game, and that's the Eagles and the Ravens. This is a good one, KJ. Spread is 3. That's just about what you would expect, I think, in this game. Baltimore laying 3 at home to the Eagles. Saquon, King Henry. Oh, man, this one's going to be tasty.
And I'm so jealous because my daughter and her fiance are going to this game. They're traveling to go to this game because he's a diehard Eagles guy. But I do wonder if there's a weakness on any side of the field, and it's very hard to say that. It might lay a bit within the Baltimore defense. So that's where my concern would be. So I would give the advantage of the Eagles offense going against the Baltimore defense, where if you're talking about the Baltimore offense going against the Eagles defense, that could be one of the better defenses they're going to see outside of Pittsburgh, to me. So that's where I see that, it's not uncommon to not see Derrick Henry be able to get off. Usually when he gets over these 100-yard totals, he ends up breaking a big run, 25, 30, sometimes 40-yard run, where before then he had been bottled up. I think this Eagles defense is sturdy enough to probably hold Derrick Henry to probably 72, somewhere around there. And I think that's where that's going to be the difference. So while I may not play a game total prop between the teams, I might look at a player prop. I don't know what Derrick Henry's number is set at, but I'm thinking it's probably somewhere around 72.
79.5 at BetMGM, Derrick Henry's rushing yardage total.
I would
so
take
you're going under
against it. Yeah. I'm going to take under that 79.
This Eagles defense has been really, really good during this winning streak. They've held quarterbacks to just 140 passing yards a game and just 5.4 yards per attempt, both fewest in the league over that span. I like them to limit Flowers and Bateman with those corners. Whether Darius Slay is able to go or not, I'm not sure. He had a concussion issue, but you still got Quinyon Mitchell. You still got Cooper DeJean. I really like the Eagles defense, I think, to limit what Lamar and the Ravens are able to do. I don't think I'll touch the spread on this one, but you look at the total, it's 51. That feels a little high. I agree. I know both offenses and what they're capable of, right? Like, you've got so many game breakers involved between Henry and Jackson and Barkley, A.J. Brown. Hurts can still do it. I understand to an extent why it's a bigger total. I just don't see it getting there.
Yeah, it's outdoor game. It's a later game. There are going to be winds. You're right there on the water there in Baltimore. So I think those things factor in. I would also be leery of Justin Tucker's consistency this year. It's been off, but this could be one of those situations where points are being lost on the total, maybe on a couple of missed field goals from each side.
Sunday night game, maybe we can save and get into it in our final segment here in just a couple minutes. It sounds like the weather in Buffalo could be real bad. Like your classic lake effect. You thought it was snowy in Cleveland last Thursday night for Steelers-Browns. That might look like kids play compared to what they're going to get in Buffalo Sunday night. We'll touch on that game. Also get you our best bets before we wrap up here live coast to coast on the BetQL network. It's the Daily Tip presented by BetMGM.
Hey, it's Sammy P. Join me and Joe Ostrowski on BetQL Daily, weekday mornings at 9 Eastern, where we look to give you the insider edge and insights to help you make smarter bets.
This is the Daily Tip on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
Alongside KJ Carson, I'm Chris Mack. It is the Daily Tip. In for Chelsea and Jenks. We'll be back on Monday. Hope you're enjoying your Thanksgiving weekend. Whether you're running around trying to get things done, maybe you're working today. Some of us have to, right? Or just chilling. We appreciate you doing it with us. You can always take us with you wherever you're going, whatever you're up to, inside that free Odyssey app, AUDACY. Download it today, and then everything's right there for you. The entire BetQL network, including the Daily Tip in podcast form whenever you want it, wherever you get your podcast. You can also watch the show always on Twitch, twitch.tv/BetQL. Our best bets in just a moment, but KJ, I mentioned it before the break. The weather could be wild Sunday night in Buffalo as they host the Niners for Sunday Night Football. I don't think there's anything better, and this is why I get so annoyed at the idea of all these roofed or domed stadiums. They're building one in Buffalo right now, or they're building a new stadium in Buffalo right now. They want to build a domed stadium in Cleveland. With a domed stadium in Cleveland, we don't get what we got last Thursday night with the Steelers and Browns, and that game was as entertaining as it was because of the weather.
So I'm with you, but I also start to realize that it can be a difficult watch when you're seeing all snow and no football. Now, what I think the solution would be is if you build a dome stadium, at least allow it to be retractable and at least have some of the snow come in, right? Like still let the snow come in for those type of games, because I would rather you have the retractable dome closed instead of having, like the half shadow that you get in Miami where there's a big one side is burning up from the sun, like, when you used to take the little magnifying glass and burning a leaf or something, and the other side is all shady and cool. Opening it, I have no problem having the dome, but I would like to see those domes open when the snow comes in, and it will can kind of control the rate of snow that's coming and blowing, because, those winds will kind of subside once you get the enclosed walls. It's just that when you see an overwhelm of snow and you can't really see the action, that part, and then you think about it. If you have the snow coming into the dome, one side is going to be a little more snow-filled than the other, and now you might have an advantage where you see a team's driving down the field, but what if they're heading towards the snow side of the game? Like, that would be fascinating. Like, now they're driving down the field, but Tony, at the 20, there's like a lot of snow.
Yeah. I mean, they do a great job, every single stadium crew, of keeping things as playable as they do. The TV crews do a great job, like they did in the Steelers-Browns game, of overlaying the lines on the screen so you can actually see the yardage markers. Here's the one thing to take away from tomorrow night's game, or for tomorrow night. Excuse me, I keep saying tomorrow because I have lost all track of what day it is. Sunday night's game is even if the bulk of the snow is over by the time the game kicks off, which looks like it should, we'll see. I mean, there's still some time for that weather to shake out. It's going to be windy. And that's always in play in Buffalo. And so that, I would think, if nothing else, is going to affect what kind of offense we're able to get out of this game. Totals at 44.5 for Niners-Bills on Sunday night. Bills laying 7. So a full touchdown and the extra point. I don't know. Look, the Niners, as they're currently constructed with all the injuries, are the Bills 7 points better than them? Yeah. I just don't know if, with everything else considered, I'm willing to lay the 7, because, I don't know, what if it's still snowing to beat the band and we're talking about 3-4 inches of snow coming down in the first half? And we're talking about the wind. And in a game where weather might be a major factor, I don't know if I'm comfortable laying the full 7 here.
I am, just because the Bills can run the ball, which has been an issue in the past, and the 49ers can't throw the ball even if there wasn't any snow or wind. So So that's the other part is when you don't have a Brock Purdy out there, and there would be even questions about his arm strength in a win situation like this. The 49ers are literally a one-dimensional team in this game if they want to have a chance, and that's Christian McCaffrey in the run game. So I don't see how the 49ers have the ability to collect points where I could see Buffalo not only being able to run the ball, but Josh Allen run the ball too. So maybe the under on the score I would look at, depending on what that number is. I might look at the under total, but I do think that, covering the 7 won't be hard for the Bills just because they have all dimensions of their offense available to them.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's a clear difference in talent and what both teams are able to do. Again, given the health situation, I'm not comfortable with the weather being what it is. It's a game I think I'm probably going to just sit back and enjoy watching, depending again on what the weather looks like. But thank God there's no roof on the place. I agree though.
Start screaming at the snow. Come on, snow! Come on! I'm trying to cover here. What's going on?
Yeah, seriously. But you're right. I understand these teams and their owners want to build these massive stadiums with a roof so that you can hold big, you want Taylor Swift to come to town. You got to have
to Cleveland, to Buffalo. Come on, bro.
She goes everywhere.
Yeah, that for half
I get
a night.
You want to have a Final Four, right? You want to be able to host events like that. You got to have the roof, but you're right. Just make it retractable, and then have a rule. As long as there's not lightning in the area, the roof stays open for NFL games.
Okay, so I'm going to go somewhere with this. Don't be offended, Cleveland and Buffalo. But look, life on I-90 is about the same once you start getting into that lake area. Who hangs out in their free time in Buffalo if the Super Bowl's there or the Final Four in Buffalo? Oh, it's really great. We're inside of a dome, but when you walk outside in March Madness, the madness will be like, finding safe travel to there. Same thing with Cleveland. So when you're talking about you want to do these other things, most of those other things you want to do, people still have to be. It's like when they used to have the Super Bowl in Detroit. It's like unless you're going out elsewhere, you're not doing anything in January, early February in Detroit in your free time. Nightlife,
look
below. No, that's what Miami and California is for.
As a proud inhabitant of the Rust Belt, let me stand up and defend Buffalo and Cleveland. If they can have a Final Four and a Super Bowl in Indianapolis, they can have one in Buffalo or Cleveland, KJ. They can do it.
Yeah, but at least Indianapolis is on a hill. Those two places are next to the lake. You see what I'm saying? Like, even Polis will tell you on a hill. So at least you can look down at something. This, you're looking down to make sure you have your gloves, a scarf. Like, you just have to think of the nightlife. Like Indiana, it's like because their entire state depends on the economy, right? Like, what else is there in Indiana? Who's hanging out in Fort Wayne, okay? I mean, who's hanging out there? But for Buffalo, it's still in the state of New York. Ohio, okay, you got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum, but where's rock and roll these days? That's why you probably have hip-hop in there and people arguing in front of the place. Okay, so, look, I love the Midwest as well. I lived out there. Trust me, I totally understand. It's like a conglomerate of 12 states where people kind of think the same and are very passionate and kind in the same way, and that's what I really love about the Midwest. But you got to think about the damn nightlife if you're going to have these big things. What are we going to go see Peebo Bryson at the Buffalo Convention Center for Super Bowl weekend because he's the entertainment? Rick James is dead, so there goes your celebration of Buffalo.
All right, let's celebrate our best bets of the
City
day.
Band comes out from Miami doing "Give It to Me, Baby" at the Super Bowl.
What do we got for him today? Hit him with it, Double D. Best bets time.
Time to place your bets.
KJ, what do you got for the people?
All right, my best bet is take the Texans on an alternative money line. -9 will get you plus money at plus 170. When I see that I can move that line up from 4 to 9 and only get to plus money at plus 170, it tells me that I'm not that crazy. So instead of, meandering with some minus 140 or something like that, man, get yourself some plus money and realize that the Jags are absolutely horrible with Mac Jones. Mac Jones is a turnover machine. In that Vikings game, he gave up 3 turnovers in 6 minutes. So keep that in mind with the Jags on the Texans money line, plus 170. It's going to be 65 degrees. So now the sun will be in Mac Jones' eyes instead of a defender too. That's my best bet.
They should put up a curtain. I'm going to go with an alt line as well. Seattle is minus 120 on the money line. That's not good enough for me. Seattle's playing the Jets. The Jets are a dumpster fire. I'll lay a field goal to get plus 120 with Seattle going to New York to take on the Jets. That is my best bet of the weekend here on the Daily Tip. Anything else you want to give the people before we get out of here, KJ?
2 more for the people. Let's go to the Steelers at the Bengals. Look, I like the Steelers to win the game, so let me move that alt 9 number down from plus 3 down to plus 1 Steelers and get me to plus 120. And then I like the Patriots money line first half against the Colts at plus 120. That's going to be a slow train moving game, but that could be a game where you could see the Patriots ahead maybe 7-3, 10-7 at the half, but not necessarily indicative of the final score.
Good call on that one. I like A&M to keep it uncomfortably close with the Longhorns tomorrow night at Kyle Field in College Station. My second grade teacher, Miss Davis, would be very proud of me right now. She taught all of us Gig 'em Aggies. And so we will throw the horns down, and we will take the Aggies plus 5.5 to keep it, like I said, uncomfortably close with the Longhorns tomorrow night at Kyle Field. One more. I don't care how many points the Celtics are laying against the Bulls tonight. Lay all the points. It's 11.5 right now. The Bulls are a disaster. The Celtics will handle business. KJ, it's always fun hanging with you. We appreciate all of you hanging with us. We'll do it again sometime soon. Chelsea and Jenks back on Monday right here on the Daily Tip presented by BetMGM.
You've been listening to the Daily Tip presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Download the app today. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.